one of the most important things is knowing why you want to do it. It's a really long course, and you have to keep up the motivation all the way through. Try and get some experience of what it might be like to be a doctor, because if you know what it's like, then you're going to know whether you want to do it.
Try and get in touch with current medical students. I've been contacted on Twitter by people wanting to do medicine, and I've been able to pass on my email address and explain to them what it's like to be a medical student and give them advice. And that'll give you a clear idea of whether medicine's something that you really want to do.
A lot of people do medicine or try to do medicine because they think it's a good career, they'll earn lots of money, or their parents want them to. And I think if that's the case, they need to really think carefully about if it is right for them. All the long hours that we do and the hard work are great when you love it, but if you don't love it, it's horrendous. So I think really just evaluate, is this what I want to do with my life?
From an academic perspective, make sure you're on track for your grades, but don't worry about grades too much. Just so long as you meet the minimum standards for the course, that's all they want from you. Becoming involved in things like sports, music, drama, anything outside of school to show an interest and to show you different types of transferable skills.
Medical schools want to know you're going to make a good doctor. The government obviously pays, I think, £250,000 per medical student to be trained up. And I think you need to demonstrate the fact you're going to spend their investment wisely by becoming a doctor and sticking at the job and being a good doctor.
Show that you know the roles of, not just the roles of healthcare professionals, not just doctors, but things like nurses, physiotherapists, radiotherapists, and all their different roles is very important.
What they're looking for in applicants, I'd probably say, is someone who is confident, willing to learn, and shows a genuine interest in the subject.
I think it's important to consider the city that you're going to, whether it's an urban environment or sort of rural environment, and whether you can cope with that. It's also helpful to look at what the university offers in terms of societies and activities, because medicine is quite a stressful degree.
I'd say do something, first of all, that's realistic. And I'm not saying that you can't apply to Oxford and Cambridge, by all means do so. But you should always pick some unis that are more realistic for you.
Get checked as often as possible with either doctors, medical students, or your careers advisors. Take constructive criticism and just keep improving it and keep handing in drafts. It will be a good few drafts.
Curricular activities that I did, so they could be like clubs that I ran in school or any sports that I did.
In my personal statement, I talked about what I thought a good doctor should be. So, for example, I thought that treating a patient was more than just treating a disease.
I wrote about work experience that I'd had so far. I also talked about work experience that I hadn't yet done, that I was planning to do.
I also talked about extra experience I'd got from doing a research project in one of my summers, which wasn't to do with medicine, it was about ecology, but I included those sorts of things as well.
So medical school interviews are very different at different medical schools. Some medical schools use a traditional panel interview where it will just be you sat with a panel of 3 asking you questions. That's a very different situation to what's called the multiple mini interview, or the MMI, where you do short stations. So it might be a group discussion, the next one might be discussion of an ethical scenario, and finally a discussion of your personal statement.
Make sure you're certain in your own mind why you want to be a doctor. Make sure you have enough work experience to communicate the fact you know what being a doctor involves, and you can then therefore demonstrate at interview your commitment to the specialty.
One of the most important things that they want to know is why you're here and why you want to do medicine, and sometimes why this course particularly.
It really shows when someone turns up and they've done their homework. So, for example, you need to read the prospectus, you need to read the curriculum.
Identify whether they're PBL or traditional course. Because if they are PBL, they will definitely ask you why you chose a PBL course. Or they may actually simulate a PBL scenario and then ask you what the good and bad points were in that scenario.
Ideally, if you can talk to one of the medical students who are already there, or if you can kind of Google experiences of other medical students at the university.
On top of that, I'd say read up on medical issues if you can. BBC Health is a good place to go. Student BMJ is a good place to go as well. And there's so many topics ethical topics that you can look upon and practice debating that with your friends.
All medical schools will ask some sort of ethical question, and I think you just need to be aware that you should approach it in a structured manner, such as you present both sides of the argument and perhaps present your own opinion at the end.
Appreciate that the people who are sat behind the desk want you to do well. They are in fact on your side. So it's really important to take a deep breath, listen to the questions that they're asking you, and try and think about what they want to hear.
The other thing they're looking for is an ability to communicate and empathise with who you're talking to. And I think that's where a lot of applicants fall down. You can distinguish a good candidate from a bad candidate by seeing how well they communicate with others. So my advice to anybody applying or who has an interview is practice, practice, practice.
Practice with your family, practice on your own in front of a mirror, plan the questions that you think you're going to be asked and some answers. If you have an idea of what you're going to be saying, then when you're really nervous and stressing out, you have something to fall back on and you can still deliver a good performance.
I've applied to medicine twice because I didn't get in first time round. The first time they didn't have the UK CAT across the UK, so I just had to sit the BMAT, which is the biomedical admissions test. That's in 3 parts. One part's aptitude, which is something you can't really revise for, just problem solving, that kind of thing. The second part is just science and maths knowledge up to about a GCSE level. And then the third part is an essay writing task where you get 30 minutes to pick an essay to write. With regards to the essay section, I think it's really important to read around your subject. And they're not expecting a polished medical answer. Generally, it's about what you understand medicine to be or the science around medicine. So definitely reading around the subject is a real help. So at the UK CAT, the second time I applied to medicine, which is split up into 4 parts. It's an aptitude test, which I don't really think you can revise for, but I would definitely recommend maybe buying a book. I bought a book of practice questions just to get yourself used to the format of the questions, because they're a lot different from what you'll have done before. So it's really helpful just getting used to the format and even just doing time tests. There's a lot of practice tests online that you can do as well, but just timing myself as well, just to check that I could do it within the time limit. I did my previous degree in neuroscience up in Edinburgh. It gave me a lot of general science information before I came into medicine. It was kind of like my backup for if I didn't get into medicine.
The first time round when I did my A-levels, I knew I wasn't going to get the grades that I needed. So the option for me was to do a BSc in biomedical sciences and then applied with my degree for medicine.
And I chose biomedical sciences as it provided me the greatest flexibility in choosing the modules.
I found it really useful as far as the physiology and the anatomy. I've done all that before, and it's definitely helped me, although I think by the time you get to phase 2, 3rd year, everyone's on a level by that point. So I'd say initially it definitely gave me an advantage.
So I had a good time learning about the scientific aspect of medicine in biomedical sciences. However, I did miss the patient contact.
I haven't found it too much of a problem with younger people at medical school because my degree was 4 years in Edinburgh, so at most I'm 4 years older than a lot of other people. Many people take gap years, and at the end of the day, I really haven't noticed much of a difference at all. I think the great thing about medicine is that it does attract people of all ages, like there's people in their 30s starting out as freshers.
I also had work experience in Malawi. That's where my parents are staying, and so I went back there and did some longer work experience there at a hospital, and spending 2 months there working in the pediatric ward really gave me a greater understanding for medicine in places where they don't have the equipment, and how to use the different communication skills and clinical examination skills in order to diagnose various ailments.
I volunteered 1 night a week at a hospice, which was local to me. I had really struggled to get any kind of formal hospital work experience, so I didn't have any of those types of placements, but I did do long-term, an evening a week at a local hospice. I actually learned a huge amount and really enjoyed it.
Volunteer working at the hospice was probably one of the most admired things that the interviewer thought of me when I was had my interview for medical school, and I'd probably say that volunteer work is probably the most important thing that you can do.
I volunteered one morning a week at my local hospital. So I was part of the volunteers. I wore a pink gingham pinny and I helped make tea and coffee on the ward for the patients. I offered to go to the shop and get them newspapers. I helped file blood results. It actually was really, really helpful because I got to know who was who in a hospital ward. I knew the different levels of doctors and nurses and healthcare professionals. And it also helped me get a good idea of what it was to be a foundation doctor, so that when I went to my interviews and they asked me, I could say I really did understand what being a doctor meant.
If you don't get into medical school, it isn't the end of the line. I know so many of my colleagues have applied second. I've got a housemate that even applied the third time round and got in then.
If you fail to get into medical school the first time round, apply again. If it's what you want to do, apply for it. Take a gap year out, that's absolutely fine. It doesn't matter what the reasons were for you not getting in, because if you're able to change that, if you're able to, for example, if it was a weak personal statement, you can build on that. If it was failing at interviews, then you can work on your interview skills.
Basically, everything is all right. It's not as bad as it seems. There's so many different pathways to get into medicine that it's not only through A-levels. There's the life sciences pathway, there's the healthcare professional pathway, going into another healthcare profession and then spending a few years in the NHS before pursuing graduate entry medicine or medicine in the 5-year course.
The other options, of course, are to do another degree and apply either for graduate entry or the 5-year entry as a graduate.
My plan B, if I didn't get into medicine, was to do a different degree in neuroscience, which is actually what ended up happening. I used my 2 spare choices on my UCAS form for 2 different neuroscience degrees.
A gap year is the first option. You need to do something constructive in that time, so something to prove your commitment to medicine and to further your application. And I worked with disadvantaged young people for 6 months, and then I spent 5 months in Uganda. So when I eventually reapplied in 2007, I was successful to 2 out of the 4 places. Alternatives are to consider other healthcare careers. So everything that happens in a hospital, in a GP surgery, is part of a network of clinicians and other healthcare professionals, all of which interact with each other and none of which can exist without the others in place.
You try again if you really think that medicine is the career for you. And if you know you're good enough to do it, then there should be no reason whatsoever why you should give up on when you fall at the first hurdle, because life's full of hurdles.